I thrashed against the restraints, my screams growing more desperate with each passing second. But it was no use. The nurse loomed over me, her eyes cold and lifeless. "We must extract all the souls who died in the fire," she said, her voice a monotone. The nurse picked up the scalpel, the blade glinting in the harsh surgical light. I lashed out in desperation, striking her with all my strength. She stumbled back as the scalpel clattered to the floor. I seized the moment, tearing free from the restraints. I bolted from the operating room and raced down the hallway. The elevator doors stood open, a beacon of hope. I lunged inside, frantically jabbing at the buttons as the doors slid shut, with the enraged nurse and orderlies surging towards me. The elevator jolted downward at dizzying speed, but then the floor gave way beneath me, and I plummeted with a scream tearing from my throat. I crashed through the darkness into frigid water, gasping as I resurfaced in the hotel's basement pool.
What's up, creatives? Last week, I was on a business trip, and I was in San Antonio. And in San Antonio, I stayed at the Emily Morgan Hotel. Now, didn't know this before I got there, but the Emily Morgan Hotel is the most haunted hotel in America. So the legend goes. And we get there, we're having a good time, and we find this out, and we have fun with it the entire time. And I come back, and of course I think, well, I should write a story about this. Now, I'm going to use NovelCrafter to write a short story. Although it's called NovelCrafter, I think it can write a short story, and then I've used it, but I want to go through my process of how I write these short stories and how I kind of get them to where I like them. I typically will write a part of it. So this is to get the idea out of my head. Because a lot of times if I have an idea for a story, I will just start writing. And I don't know how many words this is. All right, 437 words. So I will typically, in a flash fiction type of deal, I'll just kind of sit down and I like to pour out about 500 to 1,000 words just to get the idea out. So that's what I did here. So then I started iterating with ChatGPT. So the idea of it is to start and say, okay, I've started here. What is, because it's a short story, what's the inciting incident and what is the ending? Because if I know how it's going to end, typically the AI model is better at dealing with the story if it knows how it ends. But this is kind of lame. I'm not going to read it, but if you kind of look at it, it's like a diary. Okay, don't want that. That's obviously I don't want. And then, of course, Emily, who stayed in the same room years ago, no, don't want that. So that's not what I want. Now, what I want is to stay true to the hotel. And the hotel, there are three main things about the hotel. One, the 14th floor had a hospital, and it still smells like a hospital on the 14th floor. Room 810 is one of the most haunted rooms in the hotel, supposedly. And the basement has a pool that was made of parts from the morgue. That's another myth. So all of these are the three myths, and these are the three elements that have to be in the story. I have to bring them into the story. Okay. And so that's the part. And so we iterate again with ChatGPT, and we kind of see, what's the horrific incident that's happening on the 14th floor. And it gave me some ideas. Didn't like any of these, but the idea of iterating and trying to come up with ideas and brainstorming with ChatGPT is never really to have it come up with the idea, but excluding ideas is just as important as including the ideas. So you start getting these ideas and you can say none of these really work, and you start to focus in on what you really want. So that's the good thing about it. So one of the lessons that I try to give people is that whatever the chatbot gives you, you don't have to accept it. Is simply, can we eliminate ideas? Can we collect ideas? And that's what we're trying to do here. But again, if we take a look at, if you take a look at what it's writing, you can see that it's not very good. But ChatGPT never really writes that great. I always have to change it. All right, so I'm continuing to iterate. It writes a little bit more, but I'm rejecting all of this because I'm going to use NovelCrafter. This is just to get ideas. Okay, so then we kind of come up with it and we say, the ending as, and you can see that I'm telling it right here where I'm saying, not the ending I want. The legend has the pool is made of parts of hospital beds. I want Brittany to somehow find herself in the pool. And you have to do something really bad to Brittany on the 14th floor where she believes she may not make it out alive. And that's the point of a story, right? Is that we have to do everything to make our protagonists believe they are not going to make it. So we have to take them to the edge. And ChatGPT doesn't want to do that because it wants to redeem everyone. And we want to take everyone to the edge. And so now we get a couple of ideas. And this is close. These are some ideas that I can work with. So I have some ideas and then I just say, give me a description of Emily. And this is where ChatGPT shines because it can create these characters. It's really good at creating these characters. Okay, so it gave me that. And then I told it about the hotel. And so now it gave me the lore of the hotel. So I have the lore and I have Brittany, a description of Brittany. I have some ideas. So now we go to NovelCrafter. The first thing in NovelCrafter is the codex. The greatest thing about NovelCrafter is this codex. So here's Brittany. So I get my description of Brittany. I get my description of the lore. And those two things are all I need for a short story. And so I go to write. And here is the description I got from ChatGPT. So I gave ChatGPT again my story and told it, give me a description of this scene. And this is the description of the scene it gave me. This then is what I put here. And what I used here. Okay. So I did this and I got my first scene here. Okay. Then we came here for the next scene and this is the next beat. And this essentially is what I took from ChatGPT. The elevator anomaly, the unsettling atmosphere, and the ghost encounter. Now, if we look at the ghost encounter, you can see that this is what it gave me. But this is what I wrote. Because what ChatGPT gave me was not scary enough, and I wanted something far scarier. Then it gave me the story, and what I did was I then came in and I just put in some more because I wanted it to go back to some normalcy. Okay, so what it did here, it put her on the elevator floor, but I didn't want to do that. So I basically put in this. It kind of wrote this. I don't really like this paragraph right here, but I'm just going to keep it just for the sake of it. And then after getting dressed, I sent her downstairs to have breakfast with the coworker. Now, and then this is where it picked up again and put it back on the elevator. And the reason I did that is because when you have, and this is my own thinking here, I don't know if I'm right, but I just think that if you have an incident like this, you need to take her back to a little sense of normalcy before you ratchet up the action again. So I wanted her to get back to normal, and this is just all talking about bacon, eggs, and whatever. And she just happens to forget her badge, and she has to go back upstairs. And then, boom, the inciting incident happens. Okay. And so now she goes through, and you can see I thrashed against the restraints. My screams growing more desperate with each passing second, but it is no use. The nurse picked up the scalpel, the blade glinting in its harsh light of an operating room. That is what I want. So I did want her to just have that moment. And then we get here, and all of this came from the chat. So one thing with NovelCrafter, if you have the subscription, you can chat with it. So I wanted some ideas of what happens in the basement, and I knew that I wanted her in the pool. I knew that I wanted her to see kind of like the morgue in the pool. I didn't really know how I was going to get her out of the pool. And again, AI does this weird thing: mysterious disappearance, secret experiments, supernatural happenings, and whispers, thief in the night, inhabiting the dark. So mundane, but then I come back and I say, well, the nurse thinks, and spelled that wrong, the nurse thinks Brittany is Emily and wants to take her soul, misspelled that, because she escaped. We need to play on that part. It comes back and it says, okay, convince the nurse, uncover Emily's story, escape, and supernatural twist. Now, this is a short story. I really don't want to try to figure out Emily's story, because it's time to end this story here. So I come back and I said, we're going to keep it simple. And you can see that here's that direction again, is that now that we've kind of iterated this, I kind of have an idea. And we're going back to that point of when you're iterating, when you're iterating with ChatGPT, with any AI model, the thing, and I'm going to say this again, it is as important to discard ideas as it is to generate them. And that's how we get to where we want to go. So I discarded everything, and now that I have some clarity. And my clarity is the nurse pulled Emily into the pool, Brittany into the pool, and below the surface, she sees the doors of the morgue. She fights back. She screams. All of a sudden, the fire breaks out. She exits the pool, runs down the hall. The ghost is calling Brittany. Okay, so I get that, and then I finally get to this story here, and everything gets here. And now I get to this last point here, and this is where I bring in room 810, because we brought in all of the elements. We have the 14th floor, we have the basement, we needed room 810. And so exiting room 810 kind of plays on it, this idea that the hotel is haunted. 810 is supposed to be the most haunted room. But I'm kind of playing on this fact that maybe 810 is not haunted, or is not the scary room that people think it is, that it is something different. But anyway, so I bring it in, not much time has passed, and Emily is thinking about leaving, but the voice says you're okay. So that's kind of the idea. And then she's questioning everything like that. She's going through it and stuff like that. So she's working through it, and she finally leaves. And then she does this final reflection. So that's the story. So This gives you an idea of how I use NovelCrafter and ChatGPT. So appreciate it for those of you who like the page, and I will see you in the next one.